Welcome back to this video series of C++ programming. This is the lecture 25 of this video series, and today we'll talk more about the inheritance in the part 3 of this inheritance video. Today we'll discuss about the constructor and destructors in the case of inheritance mechanism. These are very important points, how to use the constructor and destructor. There are two major questions that arise related to constructor and destructor when inheritance is involved. First is, when are this base class and derived class constructor and destructor functions are called? And second, how can parameters be passed to a base class and the base class constructor function? So we'll talk about these points in this video. So first, understand about these 2 points. When an object of a derived class is created, if the base class contains a constructor, it will be called first, followed by the derived class constructor. That means when you create an object of a derived class, as you know, when you create an object, automatically a constructor function will be called. So in this case, first the base constructor function will be called, followed with the derived class constructor. But in case of a destructor, when that derived class object is destroyed, its destructor is called first. So destructor of a derived class is called first, followed with the base class destructor if it exists. So put differently, constructor functions are executed in their order of derivation. However, the destructor functions are executed in the reverse order of derivation. The same general rule applies in situation involving the multiple base classes. So we'll talk about this 3 points. So we'll add these 3 points and we'll understand with the help of the example. Here I have created one class. We'll call this as a base class. Now inside this we'll create some public member functions. We'll create a constructor for this class. So how to create a constructor, you have to specify the name of this class here, and then it will act as another function similar to another function. Then you can specify the parameters within this function if you are providing to an object. As now this is one parameterless constructor. So here we'll print some string. So printing that as a base constructor. Now we'll create another class and we'll call this as a derived, and we'll derive this from the base class. So here also we'll create another constructor and we'll print output as a derived constructor in this case. Now inside this main function, let's create a object of the derived class called as D. Now as you know, when you create an object, automatically the constructor functions are called. Now since this object is of a derived class, and now this derived class is derived from this base class. So when you create an object, as we talked before, first the constructor of this base class will be called, from which this derived class is derived, and then followed with the constructor of this derived class. So let's compile the program and let's run it to see whether it is showing the same results. So as you can see, it is outputting the first string as a base constructor and second as a derived constructor. So this is how the constructor execution happens in case of this inheritance mechanism. If you create a base class object, so in this case I'll create just this base class object as a B, and if I try to run this program, then in this case it should print only one string here for this base class object, that is a base constructor, because obviously it has nothing to do with this derived class, so it is only restricted to this base classes, so it will call only this constructor function. Also we'll create a destructor for within these functions. So to create a destructor, you have to specify this symbol here. Now we'll call this as a base destructor, and similarly we'll create a destructor here. We'll call this as a derived destructor. For this destructor to call, we have to uh, exit from this main function, because these variables or these objects are present within this main functions. So as soon as we exit from this main function, those objects will be destroyed. So this destructor will be called. So in this case, I will have to remove this loop here, and let's compile the program. So program is running, but it won't print any output. So we'll have to see it with the help of this putting some breakpoints. So as we know, so when you destruct this objects, the call to this destructor is happened in the reverse order of their constructor execution. So that means suppose now there's only one object which is of a derived class. So when you destruct this object, it will first call the destructor of this derived class, and then it will call the destructor of the base class, which is exactly reverse in the case of the constructor, where the constructor for the base class is called first and then followed with the derived class. So now I put a breakpoint here inside this base class function. So if I just run this program, so if you see, it has printed this output. So for the case of destructor, it first called this derived destructor, and now it break here. So if I run here, so yeah, it won't allow me to run because it will simply exit from here. But anyways, so we saw how this destructor flow is executed. So it is first calling this derived class destructor, and then it's finally calling this base class destructor. So we saw how this execution of this constructor and destructor happens in case of a inheritance in C++ program. Let's talk about the second point, that is how to pass the parameter to this base class constructor. Now in this example, suppose now this object expects some parameters here. So we're passing one value here, and in case of this constructor function, we'll be expecting some value. Now let's compile a program first. So here I have modified this constructor for this derived class, um, and now if I compile the program, let's see what does it outputs. So it compiled successfully. So uh, when you write this program, when you create this object, first the constructor for this base class will be called. Now here if you see, here we are passing the parameters, so it requires this parameterized constructor, but it is required only for the derived classes. It is not required for the base classes. So let's run this program first and let's understand. Okay, let me put this while loop back here. Now in this case, you can see it is printed these two statements. One is a base constructor and second is a derived constructor. So that means now, even though we are passing the parameter here, only parameterized constructor is required within the derived class because this object is of a derived class. For the base classes, it is not required to specify any parameters. But in case where we are passing the parameters to a, so let me put this uh, okay, in this case now suppose you want to pass the parameters to a base class from the derived class. So as you know, when you create an object of the derived class, it will first go here, it will execute this function or constructor, but before executing this constructor function, it will jump to a constructor of the base class function and will execute that constructor function first, followed with this derived class constructor function. So if you want to pass any parameters, you can pass from here. So what we have to do is to specify this colon operator, then the name of that base class, and then the parameter. Say suppose now, so here also now it wants the matching constructor, so you have to specify a parameter here, and here we'll pass one modified value, that is a plus 3, and here we're passing the 2, so it should first collect this value a in this constructor function, which it should print here when you execute this derived constructor, and this a plus 3 will be passed to this base constructor where it should print this modified value. So now let's compile this program and let's run it to verify the outputs. You can see here it first printed the value as a 5 and second as 3. The reason it's printed as 5 because we are adding 3 when we are passing the parameter to a base constructor. So here when you are passing the parameter to a base constructor, we are modifying that value of a. So that's the reason it's printing the output as a 5. So we saw how we can pass a parameter to a base constructor from the derived constructor. If you have this derived class is derived from the multiple base classes, so suppose now I create another class here, we call this as a base 1, and here if I derive this class from both these base classes, so it will inherit all the properties of the both the base and the base 1 class. Now in this case, here compiler expect you pass both the parameters to both this uh, the base and a base 1 class constructors. So, so what you have to do is you have to specify the name of that new class and some value. Say we pass the value as a plus 4. So this is how the multiple this is how the parameters can be passed to a multiple classes from which this derived class is inherited or derived from. Now if I run the program, let's see what does it outputs. It is outputting the value as a 5 and showing it a base constructor, then the 6 and a base 1 constructor. So in this case, the first 5 is passed and the 6 is passed. So the base constructor is first executed and followed with this base 1 constructor. Now let's change this order. Let's pass this base 1 here, specify base 1 here and then the base here. Now let's compile the program and let's see the output. Here now it is outputting the value as a 6 as you expected, the string as a base constructor, and here the base 1 constructor. So if you observe, you must have observed now this here this specifying this base one or base one, this order of specification does not matter here. In both scenarios, no matters in which specific order you specify this base one and a base parameters, in both the cases this base constructor is called first, followed with the base one constructor. So I hope now you have understood the concept of this constructor and destructor in case of inheritance mechanism. So this is all from this video. Thanks for watching the video and stay tuned for the upcoming videos.